Hi folks, this is Dan Abbott. I'm making this video to show you how to go and find AutoCAD at the Autodesk website. That means you're going to have to set up an account first, then you can download whatever software they have from an educational website, and it's for educational purposes only. So I just caution you right now, do not use this software for any commercial application. Don't let anybody talk you into using it for commercial application. There are severe penalties for doing that. So let's go from there. The website, the screen that you're looking at right now is my browser website. Just go ahead and type Autodesk Student in a browser window, and you'll get, first thing it says is an ad for Fusion. We're not going to use Fusion 3D. Autodesk Student Community, you can go there. You can also just go to the Autodesk website itself. We'll go to the Student Community. Comes up like this, and you have a Get Started button. Now I already have a login, but I'm going to just show you what you need to do. When you go to the Get Started button, it comes up and it asks you for your email, and then it's going to go and ask for an account. What you need to do is to set up an account. You need to create an account. That means you're going to have to select your country. You're going to have to check your role, which is student, and then your institution type, which is a university post-secondary. Once you've done that, go through the other steps, and that will give you access to the screen where you can download software. Once you've done that, then you go back to the screen and sign in. You sign in. I've already got my sign-in information there. When you sign in, you'll get to this page. This page has the software you can download. If you don't see that page when you sign in, go up here to Get Products instead. We've got all kinds of software here. You'll be using Revit at some point. You may well be, at least. Inventor, something else that might be useful to you, but for this class we're going to be using AutoCAD itself. I would not recommend AutoCAD for the Mac. Even if you have a Mac, it's a very different piece of software. It is less capable. The interface is quite different. This class is going to be using only the Windows-based version because after 30-some years of dealing with AutoCAD, I have never once dealt with anybody in business or in industry who uses the Mac version. It's going to be using. You'll notice there's other choices here. You can go back earlier releases. But since I'm going to be using 2021, I think that makes sense for you to do it. And then you just pick Windows because that's what it is. And now when you go to the Install button, you can either download it or install it. I'm going to install it on this computer because I just uninstalled all my Autodesk products. Comes up, asks you what you want to do. I'm going to save that file. It's going to save it to my download folder on this computer. If I open up my download folder, you'll see it is still downloading right now. So you don't want to be jumping in there a little too quickly. It's an exe file, and now it's done. Double click that file. Because exe stands for executable file, by the way. You need administrative permission in order to install software. So if you happen to be logged on with a user account that doesn't have an administrative permission, you're going to have to go and log on with one that does. Say yes. Make that minimize. And now it's going to go through the install process. I'm going to pause this video because this is a somewhat lengthy process, and I'll restart it when I get to the next. So here's the next thing you have to do. The next step is to go over here and make a decision about what you want to do as far as where you put it. I would simply put it where it wants to install it by default. That would be on the C drive. You pick Install Now. Now it's going to go down through, and this is the part that takes a little bit of time. You can pause that, but probably your best bet is just to let it run its course. I'm now going to pause again on this video, and then I'll be back when we get to the next. So now I've successfully installed that. It took about 6 minutes, and I am going to pick Launch Now. I'll launch the software. I'll show you what it looks like, and I'm going to show you some changes that I'd highly recommend you make once you start it. The way we teach this software is what's called command-based. We're going to talk about how you deal with this CAD software by identifying individual commands. There are a number of ways that you can issue commands in AutoCAD. What I want to do is to use the command line for a number of reasons that we'll talk about as we go along. The first sign you might get, it depends on whether you have any DWG files, is whether or not you want AutoCAD to be associated with the file type DWG. We do, so we're going to just pick that. Now you have this screen. This screen shows you recent documents and simply some samples that they send you that you can open up and take a look at if you want. Over here we have Start a New Drawing. And right below that it says Templates. And templates are really They give you a lot of them. There's only two that make any, they're going to affect us at all. A template file is a file that has certain settings in it already. When you do CAD applications, you'll make your own template files with as many things as possible already set. During this class, as you go along the course, you may choose to do that here as well. And if you decide you want to do that, just let me know and I'll show you how, or you can go on my YouTube channel and find a video there on how to set up templates. We're going to deal with one of two templates here. The AutoCAD DWT template, which is set up for imperial units, which are in US inches, and the AutoCAD ISO DWT, which is ISO stands for International Standards Organization, and that's set up for metric units. You really ought to decide in advance what you're working with. Possible to switch over once you start something. Just a lot easier, especially at the beginning if you decide in advance what you want to use. We'll go with the AutoCAD.DWT. That's going to give us inches. This is what the screen looks like when you first start AutoCAD. There are a lot of things about this that I don't personally like, but you might like them. But there are a couple things in particular. First, what are we looking at? We're looking at the Cartesian coordinate system, as you are in all CAD programs. And the Cartesian coordinate system consists of a horizontal line, a vertical line, both of which are called axes. And every CAD program uses a coordinate system in order to locate precisely where points are. The horizontal is the x-axis, the vertical is the y-axis, and there is a z-axis that's 3D that comes right out of the screen at you. What you can do is think in terms of drawing on the floor, that this is the floor of the AutoCAD universe. In the lower left-hand corner right over here, there is an icon showing you the x and y axis orientation. And you can also move that around. If you pick it, you can actually put it places. You can move the origin. You can change the x-axis and the y-axis by rotating them. But because this course is going to be dealing exclusively with 2D AutoCAD, I want you to leave it there. I think it's going to be confusing if you start moving things around. Now, to that point, in the upper right-hand corner is something called a view cube. AutoCAD has this turned on by default. The problem is if you happen to do that, we're now looking down at the floor from an angle known as an isometric angle. That's still the x-axis. That's still the y-axis. The z-axis would come straight up from there. But this is going to be a little confusing because when you try drawing in this orientation, that's what a circle is isometrically. It looks like an ellipse. If this happens to you, you can go up here and pick top, and then it goes back to the top view looking straight down. And now the circle looks like a circle. I find that for most new users, the best thing to do right here is to get rid of that nav cube. Unfortunately, there's no obvious way to do it. What you have to do is type in NAVV, and as you start typing in, you get the things that start with NAVV, and one of them is navcube display, and the other one is navcube. If you pick navcube display and set that to 0, that navcube goes away, and you're unlikely to accidentally pick it. There's also something up here. It's another navigation tool that allows you to deal with things in 3D, and that one has a little X in it, so we're going to just get rid of that one right there. Highly recommend you do that so you don't end up confused by finding yourself looking from an isometric point of view at something that you're trying to draw in 2D. Now the most significant thing that, in my opinion, you ought to change is what's called dynamic input. You'll notice if I say I want to draw a line, right at my cursor, which I'm moving around right now, there's a little command line that gets dragged around with it. That's known as dynamic input. In other words, it's dynamic because you can see it as you're typing. If I were to start drawing a line, it shows me what the line looks like, shows me the angle, and that appears to be useful to you because it tells you what the length of the line is. And in AutoCAD, what you're going to be doing when you generate generate geometry, is the geometry itself is going to be drawn specific sizes. And there's possible, but we're not going to deal with it, it's possible to change the size of something by simply typing in a new dimension. What we're going to do is draw a geometry in AutoCAD in actual size, and full size, by the way, no matter what we're drawing. You want to draw the universe, you draw it full size. You want to draw a house, you draw it full size. This AutoCAD universe you see here, we can zoom out so far that if we wanted to, we could draw the entire solar system and put it in an AutoCAD drawing. that dynamic input does cause some problems. And so what I do when I teach, and what I am going to recommend that you do, but you don't have to, because however it works best for you to deal with the AutoCAD interface is what you want to do. You notice that down here there is a command line. It's not the dynamic command line. If I click in it and type L, I'm still getting dynamic, but it also shows me in the command line what's going on. I'm going to do a couple things with this command line. Right now it's called floating. If I move it off of the bottom, it can go anywhere you want on the screen. I think it works best if it's nailed down, either to the bottom, which is typical, or to the top, which is where I'm going to put it in a minute, because I think it'll be easier for you to read what I'm doing. I'm going to bring it down to the bottom, and while it's at the bottom, I'm going to move my cursor down until I get two little horizontal lines with a tiny arrow up and a tiny arrow down. I want a few more lines to be shown because it's very helpful to me as I'm using the software to be able to see them. Now I'm going to go back to that little set of dots, hold the left button on my mouse down. I'm going to drag this all the way to the top, and I'm going to dock it, it's called. I'm going to park it at the top of the screen because I think it's going to be easier for you to see up there. I'm going to make a few other changes in a minute, but I also want to turn off the dynamic input because it changes the way that AutoCAD works. And in my experience, serious professional users almost never have that turned on. That's really there as a way of making it a little easier for people when they first start learning the software to see what's happening. But I'm going to put you in the category of a serious professional user right off the bat. So I'm going to turn that off. Now here's the problem. There is a way to turn it off at the command line, but what I'd like to be able to do is just go down to the bottom where there's a line known as a status bar right down here. I'd like to be able to go and just click a button and turn it off there. That way if I wanted to turn it on again later, I could. Problem is there is no button down here for turning it on and off. There are other buttons for turning things on and off. Drawing display grid. I don't like the drawing display grid, so I always turn it off. You can see it gets rid of those lines in the background. There's also something called the snap grid. I don't like that either. I always turn that off, or almost always turn that off. There are times when I use it. And we have another option that we can turn on and off. It's called Ortho Mode. We're not going to use that. That's really an old legacy tool from a time when AutoCAD really had no other way of drawing things that were always horizontal or vertical. And then we have another button that is a polar option. And that polar option I think we do want on. We're going to leave that. The point I'm making is there are some buttons down here that I don't care about because I don't need to turn things on and off. And there are some things that I think are missing. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to go to the lower right-hand corner. And in the lower right-hand corner, there are three vertical lines. And there's a button, and if you hold your mouse over it, it says Customize. I'm going to left-click. And by the way, in AutoCAD and in most CAD programs, a left-click on your mouse is what you do to select something. So if there's an action that you want to take, and the verb associated with that action is select or pick, the left button is how you do it. I'm going to left click on this and it will open up all the things that I could put down here if I want. So I'm going to go to the top, and the first thing that I'm going to see is coordinates, and I like having my coordinates, which means the X and Y values as I move my mouse around and my cursor. I like having those on, so I'm going to turn them on, and if you notice down below, I now have an X value and a Y value and a Z value, which for me is going to be 0 for everything I do today. Model space, it's something I like to be able to turn on and off. I like turning the grid on and off, but I can do that with the F7 key. I never use the snap mode, so I'm just going to clear that out. Ortho mode I don't care about. Polar tracking I do. Isometric drafting I don't care about. I'm going to clear that. Object snap tracking I want to be able to turn on and off. 2D object snaps, absolutely want to turn them on and off. I want line weights to be able to be something I turn on and off as well, so I'm going to add that. Coming down here, if you notice right there, oh, that's dynamic UCS. I don't want that. Oh, dynamic input is up here. I missed it. So I go back up to dynamic input. I want to see that button so that I can turn dynamic input off. Without seeing the button, the only way to turn it off is to type a variable in the command line. I like my units to show up, so I'm going to select units here, and if you look down below, now it tells me they're decimal, and that means I can change them quickly right here from decimal to architectural to engineering to fractional to scientific. Decimal is what I'm going to use for virtually everything I draw until we start doing architectural drawing. So now I've got that turned on and off. And I like quick properties as something I can turn on and off. Workspace switching, isolate, those are all good things. So now I'm done displaying all the buttons down here that I might be interested in. And the one that I'm going to pick right now is the one that looks like a cross and a little horizontal rectangle. And that's dynamic input. DYN mode is the variable name, which I could have typed at the command line and set to 0. But now that I have this button, I can do that. Now, as I draw, I'm not going to have anything at the cursor, which I find gets in the way, especially with more complex drawing. Instead, everything I do is going to be at the command line that I'm going to look at up here. You may not like drawing that way. That's entirely up to you. You can leave dynamic input on. There is going to be a problem when we start dealing with Cartesian elements, and I'll point that out to you when we cover it. And the problem is that they behave differently with dynamic input on or off. So now I'm getting close to what I like here. But from a teaching point of view, I also find that that dark scheme on the ribbon, and the ribbon up here, by the way, is just a series of all the commands available to you in AutoCAD. I actually turn that ribbon off when I draw and do most things at the command line. For now, you're probably going to want to leave that on because it's easier to look up and say, what can I draw? Oh, I can draw lines and polylines, whatever that is. We'll talk about that extensively. I can draw circles, and if you just wait a minute, it tells you what that is, and it even shows you how to do it. So from a learning point of view, you probably want to leave that ribbon so you can see it. It's possible to just minimize it. If I go up here to that little button right there, I can do that. And when I say I turn it off, what I really mean is I minimize it to that point so I have a larger drawing area. But for what we're going to do in this class, I'm going to leave it on so that you can see it and see what we're doing as we go through and I show you various commands. But because I'm going to be teaching over the internet with Zoom, I want to make sure you can read what I do up here. So I want the text up there to be bigger. I also want to put a white background here because I think it's going to be easier for you to see, and I want a white background down here for the same reason. So now I'm going to use the other button on the mouse. Well, there are three that are significant. One's a wheel, actually. The left button I told you is like, if I came over here and wanted to pick that, left button, I've selected it. Escape key, I've unselected it. Left button, I've picked a crossing window. Now I've selected more than one thing. Escape key, I'm done. Left button going the other direction, I'm making what's called a window. So the only things it'll pick are things that are inside the window. Escape key if I don't want that. The right button is always in AutoCAD either a way to confirm what you just did or to bring up a menu. There's one right there. It's a cursor menu. When I bring up that cursor menu, it does have some options here. For one thing, I can repeat my last command by picking it here, which I can also do by pressing the space bar or pressing the enter key. But what I'm looking at right now is I want to go all the way to the bottom where it says options. Now that's the name of an AutoCAD command. I could have typed it at the command line. I could also have typed a nickname for it, which was OP. But I'm going to pick options, and it opens up the options dialog box. Now, you don't have to do any of this. If you are happy with the way AutoCAD looks right now, don't even worry about this. But I'm making these changes, and I'm trying to show you that the interface itself is highly customizable, and you can set it up for whatever works best for you. For me, I'm going to go to Display, and under Display, I'm going to say I don't want the color theme to be dark. I want it to be light, and when I apply it, you'll see what happens up here. Now, I think it's going to be easier for you to see. Down here, there are two buttons. One's called Fonts. I'm going to pick a different font than the one that is the default, because I find Lucinda Console, if I set it to 14 points, that now that's going to give me a command line that's much easier for you to read. And while I'm here, I'm going to go to Colors. I'm going to change my background from the red, blue, and green combination, and that's 33, 40, and 48, relative amounts of the different colors that go into forming all the colors. That's pretty close to black. Why they have that, I'm not quite sure. It's slightly grayer than black. And you have all kinds of choices here. I'm going to use white, but I will say there are a lot of people who prefer to come in here, go to Index Colors, and set their background to a very light gray. So if I set that to a light gray, looks like that. We can use light gray. I think sometimes light gray works pretty well. That's what I use when I'm working on an actual project rather than teaching. But from my experience, students have a little better time of it if I just make the background in as much contrast as possible with what I'm drawing. So at this point, we've gone and found AutoCAD. We've downloaded it. We've installed it. I've shown you the kinds of things that I would do to set it up. And now what I just want to do is go through the sort of basic discussion of the Cartesian coordinate system. What I've done here for my drawing, I'm going to erase that. And again, I'm going to pick a point on the screen, pick left button, let it go. I'm dragging right to left, which gives me what's called a crossing window. I'm going to pick another point on the screen, left button. Now I have selected all those entities. Now that I've selected those entities, I want to erase them. A couple ways I can do that. If I right click, I can pick erase from that menu right there. And now they're all gone. I'm going to use the U space bar to bring those things back. I could also type the letter E, it stands for erase. You can see it up in my command line there. Press enter, and that's a nickname for the erase command. It'll do the same thing. I could also, if I wanted to, but I would not, type the word erase. When it asks me for my objects, I can either type all, forgetting all the objects, or I could select them now. That's the distinction that AutoCAD makes between what's called verb-noun and noun-verb selection. In AutoCAD, unlike some other CAD programs, I can select items, and then, that would be selecting the item, gives me the noun, I have the items, and then the verb is erase. So if it's been selected and I type E for erase, they go away. Bringing them back now. I can also say I want to erase, start with the verb, and then it says up here, select your objects. I can pick them one at a time. One. I'll just pick one. I can also left click, drag through objects and pick them that way. Or I could left click and go to the right and just grab objects by encircling them, or I guess ensquaring them because it's rectangular at least by default. And then press the enter key of the space bar and then they go away. The reason I'm doing this is what I want to do is I want to take the coordinate system icon. I want to move it into the middle of the screen. Now I did that with the third button wheel. It's the wheel that's right in the middle of your mouse. And that wheel is really critical in AutoCAD. It allows you, if you roll the wheel, to zoom in and zoom out. It allows you, if you push the wheel down, to do what's called panning, where you're not changing anything on the screen, but you're changing your view of it. Now I'm moving that in the middle because AutoCAD is the Cartesian program, as is every other CAD program. That means there's a place where the X and Y axes cross, and that place is 0, 0. That would be known as an absolute coordinate. Now this is going to work for me because I turned off dynamic input. If you don't turn off dynamic input, this is going to it's going to work a little differently. But I'm not really trying to teach you how to draw right now. What I want to do instead is to point some things out about the Cartesian coordinate system. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line. And by the way, I could have come up here to the ribbon, pick the line command, and it gives me a prompt at the command prompt. And you look at that, it says specify first point. Well, what I want for a first point is something that's going to go right through the origin. So there's nothing there yet. There's nothing to select. So what I'm going to do when I do this is I'm going to type in as my first point 0, 0. 0, 0 starts right at that 0 point. I'm going to go to the right. Now I'm going to do another line. Now I have something to snap to. And by something to snap to, I mean once you've got elements drawn, every CAD program does this and really has to be accurate. I'm not going to have to type in 0, 0 or kind of eyeball where I want to go. Watch what happens as I get near that line. You can see there's a little green box that shows up at the end. That's because Object Snap is set right now to look automatically for endpoints and several other elements on individual entities. If I'm to the right of the midpoint of this, it snaps to the other end. Endpoint, endpoint. Now I always have midpoint turned on as well, but for right now, if I come down here, once I see that green box, I can select that point by just left clicking, and now it goes to the endpoint of that line. That's precisely drawn to 16 decimal places, and using object snaps is critical, essential for everything that you do in this class. Now if we took a look at what we call those from a Cartesian point of view, that's the x-axis. That's the y-axis. And starting from 0, everything in this quadrant, which is where we normally draw, everything in that quadrant is going to be positive x and positive y. So in other words, if I decide to draw a circle by typing the letter C and it asks me where to put it, if I type 5, 5, it's going to snap 5 units over from 0 and 5 units up from 0 exactly to that location, that 5, 5 location. Now I look at the prompt to see what it wants from me, and what it wants from me is a radius. Now that's a little weird because in graphics, circles should have a diameter, but you have to look at the AutoCAD prompt sometimes to see what it wants. If I know the radius of the circle, I can type it. If I don't want the radius, I can either type the letter D or pick diameter here. So if I want a circle with a diameter of 4, I type in a 4 now, and that circle is exactly 4 units across. And the units, by the way, represent whatever I think I'm drawing in. As long as I'm consistent, that can be inches or millimeters. Now, if I wanted to put that same circle over here, though, I would draw this, and now when it asks me for the starting point, instead of 5, 5, I'm going to type negative 5, 5. And if I say D and then 4, I've got the same size circle, but it's over here in this quadrant. Well, that quadrant, if we would extend this line out like that, extend this line down like that, there are 4 quadrants in the Cartesian system. And those 4 quadrants are represented by elements or by values that represent an x and a y coordinate. Over here, I'm just going to copy these over. I meant to type CO. I'm going to copy those over and bring them over here. Over here, we don't have a positive x. We have a negative x. But we do have a positive y because everything above 0, 0 is positive in the y direction. Everything to the right of 0, 0 is positive in the x direction. So now we draw another circle at negative 5, negative 5. We're going to have a negative 5 in the x direction and a negative 5 in the y direction. Comes down here. I'll type a D, make that one 4. And just because I'm being lazy, I will copy. Here we go. I'll copy those elements down here. And down here, we have a negative x, but we also have a negative y. Now, understanding the Cartesian system is really essential for dealing with any CAD program. So we'll just finish this up by saying I want another circle, and this time it's going to be positive 5, negative 5. And that's going to put it in that lower right-hand quadrant. I'll make the diameter 4 for that as well. And again, being lazy, I'll just copy this down here. By the way, copying things you've already done in CAD, that's not really being lazy, that's being efficient. Because I don't have to type this whole thing out anymore. Instead, I can come over here and say, well, that's still positive x because it's to the right, but it's not positive y because it's below. So I'm going to change that word positive, and instead I'm going to change it to negative. So now, those are the various x and y values and what they mean. Positive always goes to the right, negative always goes to the left, positive always goes up, negative always goes down when you apply them to one of the coordinates. That's true of the z coordinate as well. We're just not dealing with that here. Now there's a couple other things that you need to know. The x direction to the right, directly to the right, is going to be called 0 degrees. And 0 degrees means that from a polar angle point of view, the Cartesian system starts by calling everything that goes to the right an angle of 0. And things get larger going counterclockwise. Now, if I come up here, y at the top, that's going to be 90. You're probably wondering why I'm typing %%. That's because that's a little code you can type in to get the degree symbol if you do %D. So up here, the y value is 90 degrees, the x value is 0 degrees, and they're not really y and x values, they're directions. So the 0 goes directly to the right, 90 goes straight up. It probably will not surprise you one bit. Again, I'm just going to steal this and bring it over here and then edit it. It probably won't surprise you one bit to see that 180 degrees is directly to the left, and of course, down below, here, down below is 270 degrees. Now I see that this video is about 30 minutes long now, which is probably long enough for this basic discussion of the Cartesian system and how to download the software and how to use it. But what I'm after here now is not so much to show you how to use the software for drawing, but to just have you understand that fundamentally what underlies every CAD program is the Cartesian coordinate system that you learned in geometry, and that understanding that will really help you in dealing with the drawings that you're about to do. I'm going to stop this video. I'm going to record it. I'm going to put it up online as your introduction video, and well, then we'll start dealing with how to actually set things up and draw.